Welcome back to Geraldine Comiskey. We're talking about the Suzy Lamplugh disappearance on the 28th of July 1986. So Susie, or Susanna, was a estate agent in London in her late 20s. Um, and she literally disappeared off the streets of London at one lunchtime. It wasn't even at night, it was during the daytime she disappeared. And I remember the case from my childhood. It was very high profile in the UK, so a complete contrast to the Sophie Toscan du Plantier murder. Susie disappeared. It was all over the news. It was on Crime Watch for a year or more afterwards, and it periodically still pops back into the news now. We do intend to talk about John Cannan, although certainly I don't think he had anything to do with it. There are people who think that he did for some reasons. There are quite good reasons why. But let's start with the same sort of question angle that we started the Sophie episode, which is, especially as you're in Ireland as well, why do you think Suzy Lamplugh is still in the news or still in people's minds now?
And well, I think it's because it's probably everyone's worst fear, either women or partners or fathers of women. I mean that you could just have an ordinary, in the middle of the day, you can just disappear, and you could be a person who leads a very normal life, and just she wasn't, she wouldn't be seen as a person who was taking tremendous risks or anything. If she went out at lunchtime in the middle of a working day and she's suddenly gone, and also because I think everyone knows, estate agents go around to houses on their own, and I think it stoked a lot of panic among people in that profession, and even now people always say, oh yeah, don't be like Suzy Lamplugh, don't go anywhere, meet a male client, in any business on your own. But I mean, it's just a terrifying thing of being an estate agent and going to a house, and this man just. There was a similar case in America actually where a man killed him, where they actually found the killer. The man killed the estate agent, but it's just, it was an everyday type of thing do to go out to show a house to a client, and then she was gone. But then of course all the other stuff coming out about her leading a double life. But I think even without that, even when we thought she just had a very vanilla life, I think it was still very interesting, because of that.
Yeah, I think if an adult literally just disappears with no, we've
Yeah.
talked about
But I mean,
those
she
times.
had mental problems. She wasn't wanting to run away. I believe she
Mm.
left her handbag behind in the office. And she went to collect a checkbook she'd left behind in a pub. And I had this theory that maybe John Cannan had stolen her checkbook out of her handbag in the pub, and then he called her. Maybe he found something with her name on it, and he rang her and said, or he left a message for her at work and said, "Will you come and pick it up or something?" And she went to meet him, and then he probably got rid of her in some way. But I don't know. I really don't know who killed her, and I think Cannan is a red herring. I think it's unlikely that it was him.
Yeah, it's worth looking a little bit about why John Cannan's name came into this. So he was actually, in fact, in prison when Susie disappeared, but there was this kind of loop. Yeah, so he had this heart. So there was this thing where he was available. He was out and about during the day, but had to be accounted for in the evening. So he was under sort of observation.
Mm.
And I think he was released the day before or the day she disappeared. It was very coincidental the way the end of his sentence was coming up and whether he was actually at large during that time. Certainly, he was available during the days. He was allowed to go out during the daytime. So
Yeah.
that gives him, and he was. I think the prison he was in was very close to where she disappeared from. So in West London. So it puts him in the area, shall we say?
Yeah.
He was obviously a convicted criminal as well, a rapist at minimum, and also violent. He'd violently attacked other women through the years as well. So he's a
Yeah.
violent man. He's a convicted criminal. He's in the area. Uh, Still, I'm not that convinced by this. But then there's this photo fit. So she went to meet a potential customer, we think, although this is in the diary in the office, but whether she ever went there or not is disputed. But the general narrative is that she went straight from the office in the Fiesta to Shoals Road, where she met a man who was looking at a property. And some people say that man was John Cannan. And there is a photo fit. I think there's actually two photo fits of this person, who is a man with dark brown hair, I think. But you were saying earlier that the eyebrows, and it didn't really look like John Cannan to you.
I mean, I think if somebody has such a distinctive, John Cannan had a very distinctive appearance. I mean, he had a kind of a Mediterranean type of appearance, and I think you'd remember him, more. You certainly the eyebrows, and he actually had eyebrows that met together as well, but I don't know if we dealt with that at the time because it wouldn't have. But he would have probably plucked them or something in the middle of his eyebrows, but he certainly had that kind of those dark features, that you certainly remember. Some people would say good looking, and some people would say kind of menacing looking, but he would have he could act very suave, and
Mm.
the police were interviewing him. I saw a thing where these body language experts were talking about him, and they said he was using words that someone of his education wouldn't normally use, and he was using them wrongly. So he wanted to give a good impression of himself. So he would have tried to impress someone like Susie, but I think that would have actually put her off. So maybe all I can think of is if it was him, maybe he stole her checkbook, pretended to find it, and she rushed out to pick it up. And she, for some reason, she decided to lie to her colleagues and her boss and say she was going to show someone. Maybe she was getting paid commission and she'd get extra money for showing a client around, that she could say the client didn't buy the house, but she was going to get paid for that or something. I don't know, but for whatever reason, she said she was going to meet a client. I think she might have been going to pick up the checkbook in the pub, and maybe it was John Cunan, and maybe he just jumped on her and dumped her somewhere down when she rejected him. Because she wasn't a girl who was short of admirers. Certainly wouldn't have been an easy prey for him. So she would have definitely reacted very badly. If he put his arm around her or something, maybe she would have pushed him away, screamed, and then he would have killed her. Maybe.
Yeah, I got the distinct impression she was quite confident and would be quite capable of sort of handling herself in those kind of situations because she had also worked for a long time on the cruise ships as well. So she was independent, she was strong-minded, she was career-minded as well.
Yeah, and
I
she had
can't.
very good self-esteem. She wouldn't be the kind of person who'd be. She wouldn't be easily intimidated. But obviously, he would get some kick out of it, and he had a very arrogant personality as well. So he would have felt that he would have felt this sense of entitlement. I think that's probably the root of it, if it was him. But I mean, it's just as likely just any number of men around like that, and it's any number of random kind of molesters wandering our streets of every town. So it could have been just as easily have been somebody else. I mean, it could have been somebody who looked more like the vote of it.
Well, the really interesting thing for me was obviously no CCTV at the time. This was the mid 80s. But did she go to that house at all? And David Vidicett, who is a former police officer, has written a really well researched, really in-depth book about this. And
Yeah,
he became convinced, from what I remember, that the circumstances on that Monday were such that the area manager was visiting the shop, the estate agent manager, the local manager was going out with him for lunch. There were quite a few of the managery type, senior manager people going out for lunch. So they're a bit short-staffed. And there's a theory
mm.
that Susie put this fake appointment in to give her a reason not to be in the office. In other words, she couldn't just pop out for lunch because it would have meant that there weren't enough people to man the office. So she came up with this fake appointment. And then, like you say, either went to get the checkbook because she wanted it back and make sure it was safe, or she willingly drove to a third location. And this is the
Mm.
location where the car was actually found. So, in fact, apart from the reliable evidence from her colleagues that she did leave the office at lunchtime, there's really very little reliable evidence that she went to Shorrolds Road, which is where the appointment was stating that she was going. But an absolute fact is that the car was found near the river, outside another Sturgis property. So the name of the estate agent was Sturgis's, and opposite another property, that car was found about 10 o'clock that night. So for a portion of that day, we don't know how long, we don't know who drove the car. We can talk about the seat and the window and the door being unlocked. But that car was very, very definitely in a particular location at 10 o'clock that night. And there is a witness that says she saw that car several times around about lunchtime at 12:30, 12:35. So there is a possibility.
It was very close to the office. She could have parked it there all day and walked to the office from there. Maybe she never went near her car. And the thing about the seat going back, I mean, an awful lot of people push the seat back all the way to get out the door. If they have, if they find it hard to get out, if it's low down the ground and the curb is high, say, or if they have a bad back, or I mean, it's amazing. My mother does this all the time. When I get into the car after her in her car, I always find she's pushed the seat back all the way, and I'm a lot taller than her, and it's too far back for me even. So that's why I wouldn't be. And the other thing is the parking. She parks in a funny way, but people do that all the time, because either they can't park properly or they find they don't want to be blocked in.
Yeah, so what I find with this case and also with the Sophie case, so there is an element of the Sophie case that we've just been talking about where she had a hire car because she was French. She just arrived, picked up a hire car from the airport. There were people saying, oh, there weren't any shoe prints in the passenger side, so she never had a person in the car with her, and there were some witnesses that there was somebody with her that she was seen at a garage. In all of these cases, it seems there's so few facts, right? There's so little evidence actually that every little piece gets massively overinterpreted. So as you say, I mean, I think about, we share a car. I have the seat much further back than my wife. So when I'm getting in, I have to move the seat before I even get in, otherwise I physically can't get in the car. And I tend to push it too far back because then I can easily just pull
Yeah.
it forwards afterwards. So all people have different things that they do when they're getting into a car or getting out of a car. It's what they were saying was that the seat was pushed right fully back so that a woman of Susie's height, could not reach the pedals. Therefore, a man must have driven it.
I mean, if it's fully back, right? I mean, even very tall men don't tend to push it all the way back. I mean, I find that the car pushed fully back, you want to be very, very tall and to push it fully back. So the only people I know push it fully back normally are mechanics when they're trying to get at the control, they're trying to get underneath the steering wheel or something. So I do think that the fully back thing is not doesn't mean that a taller person was in it. It just meant someone pushed it fully back for whatever reason to get. Maybe she dropped something underneath the steering wheel and she bent down to get it. Maybe an earring or something, or maybe she just wanted drop something under the seat, a coin or something, or she just wanted to get out and the curb was high and she needed a bit of leverage to push against.
So what about this then? So let's disregard the position of the seat as being relevant. What about the purse or the keys? So it was unlocked. The car was found unlocked, and I
Hmm.
believe the purse was still in there in the door or the glove box or something. So that's suggesting to some people that she left either not of her own free will. She was either dragged from the vehicle or she only intended to be gone for seconds or a minute or two.
Well, she didn't get into the car. Maybe she never brought her purse. She was in the office. She said, "Oh, where's my purse?" So she went around the corner to her car. She just gave some bullshit excuse about and going up to see a client because she wanted to get out of that moment when they all needed her in the office for the important when the person from head office is coming. So they needed people in the office. She urgently needed to go and find out where she left her purse. Never mind the checkbook even. She might have just come back to look for the purse and her house keys perhaps. So she went back to the car and she never got to the car. She was intending to go there and somebody jumped her on the way.
And something else that's not very often mentioned, or at least I don't think enough, is that this was not her car. This was owned by the estate agent, and other people did drive it. We know that one of the assistants drove it, a young man drove it that morning and had parked it, and he gave the keys to Sophie later on and told her where it was. So it was at the time, it was very clear that the number plate and the Fiesta and everything was Susie's car. But in fact, that was not the case. It was just an unmarked company car that anybody could have driven. Those kind of things make me question it a little bit more. I think when you imagine when the police are preparing for Crime Watch, and it's really certainly in the 80s and 90s, it was only when it hit Crime Watch that you realise this was really serious. In other words, a time had gone on such that the police were just lost. They were just stuck. So by the time it hits Crime Watch, you know that this is a very major case that's stuck. And so I would imagine the police want to present evidence in a confident way because what you don't want is the public to misinterpret or to disregard evidence, that you've spent a lot of time curating. And a key feature of Crime Watch back then was the reconstruction, for example. So they will reconstruct what they think happened. And that's where all this photo fit. There was a scene, possible argument outside.
I think when you reconstruct things, people start filling in the gaps. Then you get an actress who looks a bit like her, and then they kind of associate her with something else. And I think the reconstructions can probably do more harm than good sometimes.
I wonder that. I think without CCTV and without all the technology, you understand why they would want to do it. But they did a reconstruction for Sophie as well, didn't they, with a lookalike back in Ireland? And I think that sometimes leads to the wrong results or unexpected results.
Oh, you know the reconstruction for Sophie. Ian Bailey actually approached the actress and said he knew Sophie. I mean, of all the stupid things to do when he was being named as a chief suspect. You know, I mean, it was really it just shows that I don't think if he was a killer and if he was that clever not to leave any evidence behind that he would be as stupid as that. You know, to walk up to the actress acting the part and say I knew her. You know, and I tried to insert himself into it. I know killers often do insert themselves. It is a flaw, the arrogance they do it. But I still think that that would have been beyond stupid to do that, to walk up to the person when they're filming, doing the reconstruction.
I seem to remember that actress took an immediate dislike to him as well. He just had that way, didn't he? Like you say he was very charismatic, and he did have that.
It's a push pull effect that some people have, you know, the Marmite effect, some people call it. And I mean, you can get the same thing. You can get a person who's actually attractive to you and also repulsive at the same time. You can meet those people, and he was one of those. That's why I think he was kind of wasted. He should have been he should have been a celebrity of some kind. You know, he would have been. I think he was before his time. He would have been a great on Love Island. Now he would have been the person that everyone was booing, and yes, he would have been on morning TV talking. Can you imagine
You
Ian Bailey if modern times, you know, if we've been young, say, you know, and he'd been on something like that.
you made me think there of the first Big Brother series with Nasty Nick, who was an absolute anti-hero. He would have been a very good villain in Big Brother or Love Island or something. But
Yeah, definitely.
let's try and stay on Susie. I know we always because we know each other through the Sophie case. It's very tempting to talk about that. But there are similarities and there are parallels. And we're just sort of saying maybe the reconstruction actually, undoubtedly, it has worked in some situations, but maybe if you're piecing together very limited facts, you might end up misleading people. And there were certain aspects to that. There was one case where somebody thought Susie was actually arguing with this customer out in the street, and there was a bottle of champagne involved with a very distinctive ribbon attached to it. And of course, if she was never there, then none of this is relevant. But certainly at the time, the narrative was that the balance of probabilities was that she had gone to Shorrells Road and she had seen a customer. They had some kind of argument, and there's neighbours who saw or maybe heard something. But then David Vidicet's book is very clear that none of that ever happened.
Yeah, I think that's imagination, you know, because I know people do that, and you tell them something. I mean, I was interviewing people once about this apparition they saw, and they saw, was it? I think it was Jesus or the Blessed Virgin. They saw them in a tree trunk, and this little girl started telling me, I saw her, I saw the angels and the saints, and her mother said, "Shut up," you know that because she realized the child was kind of fantasizing. But I said, "No, look, let her talk," you know. But this child really believed she'd seen all these things and everything, you know, it all came, but the same with the champagne bottle. They had this idea of Suzy Lamplugh, glamorous girl in an estate agent. It was the uppy area, and they suddenly decided to, oh yeah, they had a champagne bottle, and she was arguing with this man. I can see how people's imagination would run away with them, and they'd be quite innocent, and it would just happen, you know.
Champagne's something I associate with, when you've agreed a sale and you want to celebrate the sale of a house, not on a first viewing.
Yeah, yeah, you associated with estate agents who were successful and glamorous, especially
Yeah.
someone like Suzy. So I can see how that would work its way into your mind, even if you didn't see it, you know, if you were in that frame of mind.
But I would imagine also for certain personality types, if you had somebody in your street 2 doors down disappear or murdered there, and there was news media everywhere and police knocking on your door, the temptation to infiltrate yourself into that case and to give yourself some importance must be quite attractive to some people.
It's like what I was saying about the guy that all the newspapers blacklisted, you know, that he used to have a connection to every story, no matter how tenuous. And it's a bit like the Nicola Bulley case as well. You remember her? I mean, there were all these stories because just people, just their imaginations ran away with them. You know, people don't mean to. It's like Chat GPT. I mean, if you ever ask Chat GPT something and it starts hallucinating, it's fascinating. It's like a person with and it's like an attention seeker. Really, it's almost human. You know, the way it hallucinates. Well, I think this is the same thing with people when they're asked a question. They desperately want to help the people. People
Mm.
are people pleasers as well. They desperately want to help the police and they want to help reporters. And then there's the other type, the kind of the people who are just attention seekers. They want all the attention on them, and they keep inserting themselves into everything, and they want people to want to be interviewed, and they want to appear on camera talking about what they saw. So there's all that, and there's just the people pleasing thing of wanting to help the police and not well meaning and putting everyone wrong then.
So I've got an interesting question to draw us towards the end of this. So we've said many times in these two cases that, there's no CCTV, or it's a remote location, or it was daytime and nobody was around. There's not enough evidence. When we look back 30 or 40 years to these cases and compare that world to what we have today, do you feel any safer? Do you think we're safer now with all the technology that we have recording everything? Or my perception is that there's roughly the same number of high profile murders as there was then, actually.
Well, I think yeah, the law is not as strict as it was, and I think that's the way. There's more random killings. I think I actually feel less safe because I mean, you don't have to go to the trouble of constructing an alibi now. You don't have to do anything. You could be caught and you will still get out of prison very quickly. So there isn't as much of a penalty for committing murder now. So I actually feel less safe. And we had a case recently, actually 2 days ago, burglar. We've had a few intruders, in this housing estate where I live, and it would be considered a very, very safe place. But my next door neighbour, some guy entered her garden and she showed us the Ring doorbell footage, and we were looking at it. And so she saw him going into the other neighbour on the other side of hers. And then he walked towards our house, and I looked at my camera footage in the front and back, and he completely skipped our house because we have a camera at the front and the back, and we also have floodlights and little kind of spotlights, little trigger lights, and I even have trail cameras around the garden. So if one thing fails, another thing will work. But anyway, he skipped our house and he went into the other neighbour on the other side of us. So he did three houses and skipped the one with more cameras. But he still didn't care about being seen in her Ring doorbell. And maybe he thought if he didn't press the buzzer, he wouldn't be seen. But he didn't look like he was trying to hide. And I mean, there's an awful lot of people have cameras, pointing everywhere. So I don't think he cared. He was just a little guy, he looked like a teenager or early 20s with a hoodie on him, so you couldn't see his face. And he was just chancing his arm, and it was around 6:30 in the morning when people are getting up. People are going to work at that time, and so I don't think they care about being caught. They're willing to take a risk. They're not. He wouldn't have wanted the hassle of being kind of floodlights coming on and everyone waking up. But he also didn't mind that my neighbour had her. She said no, she was up at that time. The lights were on in some of the rooms, so he would have known that he could be caught, and yet he took the risk. I think there's less. There's less to lose now if you're caught, and so you're more likely to be caught by a random person. But years ago, you're more likely to be. You could keep yourself safe because you sort of say, well, I won't go out with somebody who gives me any red flags. For example, I won't go on my own to a house viewing with an estate agent. I mean, as a journalist, I used to always arrange to meet somebody and I'd tell someone where I was going. I didn't have to go anywhere alone. But generally, we used to work in pairs. We used to work with reporter and photographer usually, and then we'd have a boss back in the office, or we'd always tell family or friends where we were going. But now I think even with those precautions now, I think there's no safeguard because people just don't care anymore about being caught.
That is interesting. So, yeah, there's a lot more evidence available, a lot more technology tracking us. We carry our phones around, which can incriminate us as well. But you're saying actually, okay, you're perhaps a bit more likely to get caught for some of those reasons.
But you're likely to get caught, but you're not likely to face any penalties, and then there's no shame as well. Shame is completely gone. So we live in a shameless society. There's kind of, they actually do not care. Their name could be in all the papers, and it could be on the front pages of the papers, and they still don't care. That they even give the finger to the police. They don't care about being arrested. They don't care about going to prison, and they don't care about what anyone thinks of them. So there's an awful lot of people like that. Whereas I think 30 years ago, there was a genuine sense of shame and of your community ostracizing you, and then of course the severe prisons. People didn't want to go to prison because it was horrible, and you could be locked away for a long time.
Well, that brings us full circle. You made me think there of Ian Bailey, who, there are certain people who they almost want to be in the papers, even if it's in a negative sense, right? I suppose a true criminal would not want to be caught because they would be prevented from committing further crimes, whether it's robbery or burglary or whatever, if that's the way they make their money. But you're saying that even if they're caught, they won't be in for very long. They'll be out again pretty soon, or they might even get off at trial anyway. They could
Yeah.
take the chance there. That we know that the courts here are quite backlogged, so it could be years before it gets to trial anyway.
It's very hard to get locked up now. I mean, there are people who have multiple previous convictions, and they still don't get locked up. They keep getting suspended sentences on top of them. and for violent crime, I mean, it's not just like shoplifting. Or I know that's still serious. No crime is victimless, but I mean, multiple violent crimes, and it's still very difficult to get locked up, even without mitigating circumstances. Even if you've there's no one to say a good word for you. I don't think the character references are even matter anymore. I think they just automatically give you a suspended sentence for the first, whatever it is, first number of victims, because they know that you'll appeal it because it's precedent, because other people have appealed it and won. So the judges just want to get them through the system because they want to get them out of their court, but they're clogging up the court. Whereas if you have to convict them, if you have to send them away, and they'll appeal, and then they'll take up more time in the court. They'll be appealing that.
Well, it's a fairly disappointing way to end, isn't it? I think these two cases, it's Christmas time and everything else. These two cases would very definitely have benefited from there being some more factual evidence, whether it was ring doorbells or phone signals or whatever it is. I feel like there's a massive lack of evidence. In Susie's case, of course, she was never found, so we have to presume that she's no longer alive. But nobody ever suggested that she's absconded and got a new life anywhere else. The assumption is she's dead and died that day or very soon after. But both of these cases could have benefited from more rigorous police work. I think that's the nicest way to say it, isn't it? There's evidence of, both police forces being a little bit, either in London they were too busy. There was another massive case going on with a cement works dodgy dealings, and a massive number of arrests had to be made on one particular morning simultaneously. So half the London police were doing that. In Sophie's case, the police were not used to dealing with murders. This was in some cases, the only murder they've ever dealt or seen within their careers.
It's so easy to blame the police, but I don't think anyone joins the police and tends to do a rubbish job. I think they do the best, and they are under a lot of pressure. Even then, they were under a lot of pressure, and they didn't have the facilities they have now, so they had to use their hunches and their local knowledge, and sometimes that doesn't work out. It actually hampered them, I think, in the case of the Sophie case, but the same as the London police, they were very busy, and they were in a high crime area. In Sophie's case, they were in a low crime area. So either way, I mean, it works against them when they're investigating something. I'm only amazed that they seem to be very successful now at investigating with all the technology they have. But I'm only amazed they could solve cases in those days at all. I mean, the cases that were solved, it was tremendous that the amount that the work they put in, the fact that they could solve them because it was so difficult 30 years ago.
It must have been horrendous. And of course, there were fingerprints were available then, but not DNA particularly, or DNA was very much in it's in very early days. So it was very basic, and it was not widely understood by juries either. It must have been
Yeah.
difficult. Basically, you needed to have witnesses, but not only that, but witnesses which corroborated each other and were reliable and believable and could present themselves in a courtroom, which is obviously quite intimidating as well.
Well, the other thing about the jury system is as well, I mean, the jury could decide, you could get the wrong jury, and juries are tend to be people who, they tend to have a 9 to 5 steady job, because most people are not compensated for jury service. If they're working shift work, for example, your boss could have you say, well, you weren't due to be in at that time on such a day, so it's very complicated for them to do jury service, and they have other responsibilities. An awful lot of people can't be on jury because of caring responsibilities, or because they're ill, or they're in certain professions. I mean, for years, journalists couldn't be on the jury. But I think between witnesses, the witnesses are not reliable. Juries are not they're obviously not infallible. And then judges, like the judges are bound by precedent a lot of the time. They are not free at all to just give somebody the sentence that the maximum sentence, because they know that if they do, that it'll be appealed, and it'll be actually waste more time. So there's an awful lot of factors that go into it. But if you could go back 30 years and use today's technology, today's investigating, to the DNA evidence and the cameras and everything like that, go back 30 years with all that, can you imagine all these crimes would have been solved very quickly?
Yeah, that's all quite a sad way to end it, isn't it? Is that these cases could and should have been solved with better techniques, more experience, all those kind of things. But then we wouldn't be talking about them either, would we?
I'd rather they didn't exist at all, really, I would. But I mean, I know, I mean, I think a lot of true crime, the fascination of true crime is motivated by fear. I mean, anyone who says they're not afraid is just lying. I think it is fear. I think we're all afraid, but maybe the only people who are not afraid are probably either. They're probably crazy, I suppose. Or they're, I think even the people who commit crimes would be afraid of being a victim. I mean, it must be horrible to be. I mean, obviously it is, but it must be terrifying to be to go out knowing that your life is going to end soon. This person is going to kill you. I always think their last moments. What was it like for poor Sophie, and what was it like for poor Susie? I just can't imagine. And then you think of their families. I mean, they're probably wondering that too. They obviously are. So that's why it's not a pleasant thing to be looking into, and yet we're fascinated by it because it's human nature to be fascinated by something that frightens us.
It is fascinating. Yeah, it really is. It's obviously even now with podcasts and so on, it's become much more accessible as well, and there's more cases being covered, I think, as well. So um, it's interesting that still, even notwithstanding the environment that we're in with true crime, that these two still stand tall above all the sort of noise in the background of all the lesser known cases.
Another thing, who are these people who are not interested in true crime? But who are these? How can they not be interested? I mean, how could you not be interested in something that could actually happen to you? Or someone you love. I think it's part of being human to be interested. I mean, even animals are interested in something that might frighten them. It's the most basic thing, isn't it? Fear.
What I would say is that we're all interested in it, but some people are really not attracted to getting into the details of it. And certainly for me, I tend to stay away from the kind of the gruesome details, the kind of crime
Yeah,
scene stuff. But for me, it's about the kind of psychological mystery of it. Is like the puzzle, what is. I think when I started writing about this stuff, I thought I was going to solve some crime and be a hero, but it very quickly, there's so many people looking at these crimes. It's very unlikely that somebody would just have this eureka moment and solve something, isn't it?
but the thing is, I think what draws me to it, I think what draws a lot of people to it as well, is how to avoid being a victim. How to actually avoid, and I mean, what it used to be so easy. You just say, okay, I won't work as an estate agent. Poor Susie. That would be one of the reasons why a lot of women, I think, didn't want to work as estate agents. And I honestly think that, because I have thought it would be quite a nice job, showing people houses, but then I wouldn't like to go to a place. So that's why an awful lot of women didn't want to work in male-dominated jobs as well, like
Mm.
because they thought you could be a victim working on a building site. I mean, there's an awful lot more to it than just not being physically able to do the jobs. And then the other thing is the fear of going out at night. I mean, this is why I got a car, and I didn't a van pulled up towards me once, and this guy pulled open the door and a taxi arrived at the same time. I jumped into the taxi. I mean, these things go to your mind. What if the taxi driver had been a killer or something? You don't know. I mean, it happens to, and you sort of say, okay, maybe I'll be immune to it now. I'm getting older, and it only happens to younger women and all this. It doesn't. It happens. Little old ladies are raped and murdered every day, and it, you know, and men are attacked and beaten up by their partners. For example, you still say, okay, if you want to live a completely safe life, you wouldn't even have to be in a relationship in case the person you love turns out to be or somebody in their family, or someone they bring home. You can't live you can't live a completely safe life, but you
No.
have to trust people at some point. But I mean, I'm just saying, it just you can kind of explore how it all goes wrong through the medium of true crime, without being from the comfort of your own home. You can explore what happens when it does go wrong, without putting yourself at risk. That's why I think the fascination for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I say Crime Watch was a big event when I was younger, and that's obviously stopped being broadcast here now. So there's maybe fewer kind of mainstream TV things
We
like
have
that.
a
There's
version
still,
of we still have a version of that here in Ireland. It used to be called Guard Patrol, and that was a bit of a naff title, but now it's called Crime Call. I think Crime
mm,
Watch is a better title. But anyway, Crime Call is called now, and it's on, I think, every second Monday. I watch it whenever I get a chance. Or I wouldn't like look back at it, but I'd watch it if it was on. I kind of watch it out of curiosity. It's usually loads of CCTV footage of criminals who don't care. I mean, they're walking, the pictures of shoplifters walking in, and you can see
mm,
their face. You can have a clear vision of their face, and they don't seem to care. And people are brazen now. But even the people that are hitting each other in the street and all, and they're not even drunk, and they're punching each other on the street, and they're
mm.
being abusive to the guards and everything. It's just people have no shame now. So I don't think watching true crime will help you to avoid being a victim now. I don't think there's any way to avoid it. You just have to just be very lucky. You pray that
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
all. Yeah.
and hopefully that it's really is very well. It's quite rare. I mean, you're sort of saying it's quite prevalent, and
It
Is that
is.
there's a contradiction there, isn't there? The crime stats are going down, right? But there is a
There's not reporting it. People have said in Dublin that they don't bother reporting it, and they don't even bother. They just go to the hospital and they don't. They just. There've been loads of cases. You know, you every time you go out. I mean, if you go into town any day, there's loads of antisocial behaviour. You're not going to keep
yeah.
running to the garden saying somebody punched me. You know, or you know. I mean, you know. I kind of try to avoid the city centre as much as I really hate it if I have to meet anyone in the city centre now. I really would rather drive down the country to meet them in a pub somewhere. Like you know, I'd
Mm.
rather drive 100 miles to meet somebody than go in on public transport into the city centre of Dublin. But it's got to the stage where it is so bad in all our towns. You know, the rural places seem to be safer. You know, because you know you kind of arrange to meet someone there, and you know the place, and you can kind of
Yeah.
bring your car. As long as you can bring your car, you have some kind of.
Well, thanks, Geraldine. It's been interesting talking again, especially over the winter period. I don't know whether there's more crimes in the winter when the longer nights and so on, but certainly Sophie's death is the 23rd of December 1996. And then Susie was a summer case, so broad daylight. So we've probably brought the mood down a little bit. Basically, people are not safe any time of year or any time of day.
But we're going to give people nightmares now, you know. But I mean, it's true though. Like, just be careful as much as you can. Wear a crash helmet when you go out, maybe.